Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, who is tax partner at GRF, CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. And we're joined today too by my business partner, Corby McGordon. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable or transferable business value, and for then planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's sellable and then help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Gentlemen, it's been 1 year since the COVID crisis struck us, and for many, if not most small business owners, it has felt probably more like 5 to 10 years in many ways. The nature of the crisis was unprecedented, really, with unique challenges having to do with working from home virtually, related security and human resources issues, in addition to reductions, of course, in revenue and profitability. It's been a tough stretch. It continues to be as we pull out of it. There were not a few owners who, before the crisis, were hoping and plan, as we know firsthand, who were hoping and planning to exit their businesses soon, very soon. Owners who are now forced have to put off retirement or whatever they were hoping to do after they leave the business. So they're now having to put off transitioning out of the business for the foreseeable future because of the last year and what has happened. And then there are others who, again, due to the crisis, are more desirous of exiting now than they were prior to the crisis. They simply don't want to go through another crisis. And so they're thinking, how can I start to plan to get out of my business sooner rather than later? So today, folks, we're going to have a conversation around exiting your business post-COVID. Things that really you should be thinking about regarding your exit plan as we more and more pull out of the crisis and return to some level of normalcy. Walter, let's start with you. You and I, we've been doing this podcast twice a month for the entire year since COVID, and before that, of course, but during COVID. And during this time, we've had a couple of different a few guests who are investment bankers or business brokers who actually do transactions, buying and selling businesses. In those conversations, has anything surprised you about what they've told us regarding the M&A market during COVID and, the demand or maybe lack thereof for sellable businesses?
Yeah, I think, I was expecting to hear a little doom and gloom from these guys. And I was really surprised to hear that there's, the market for sellable businesses is really strong right now. And, they point out there's a few factors, and there's a lot of money floating around out there. And there's people who have either their businesses, which were, more directly impacted by COVID. Maybe they've had to shut those businesses down, or maybe they've left their jobs. And there's people out there looking for businesses. But I think the key point, and you mentioned it, is the market is strong for a sellable business. So that, to me, is the key. Is your business sellable or not? And we'll talk about that some more later, because I think COVID helped to reveal the sellability of certain companies.
Yeah, and that's true regardless, right, of COVID or no COVID. There's always a market for sellable businesses, but maybe that market's only been strengthened or, increased as a result of COVID because,
So what are you guys seeing? I mean, you and Corb work with a ton of business owners. What have you been seeing as far as just just how their businesses are doing now that we're kind of coming out of COVID? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Corb, what would you say?
I would say one of the things that's really come through is just the fortitude of owners. When this all happened, PPP started percolating up, and boy, I think a lot of owners were thinking there's a big cliff that they're all going to drive off, and I think they've tapped a lot of latent skill where boy, entrepreneurs are young and they work hard and you've been in it a while. I think you can get a little, just complacent, but boy, they've re-energized. The way they've gone about solving problems, building team, all the rest of that, I think, in a way they're coming out healthier than when they went in, which is just really, it's encouraging. And it's fascinating to see, boomer business owners in a way kind of doing the real heavy lifting in the trenches, but succeeding.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I think it's amazing
that's one of
how
the reasons we all
flexible people have proven to be. I mean, like you said, a lot of these baby boomer owners, a lot of our owners, are, on the older side, they're within 5 or 10 years of retirement, and they've, in a lot of cases, they had to come up with a whole new business model. And, when you're faced with a crisis, you can say, woe is me, or you can do it. And, across the board, I saw clients just really stepping up, and they've made, changes in their business model that are really going to make them more profitable and better run businesses going forward. So as odd as it sounds and as horrible as it's been, there's going to be a lot of positives for our clients coming out of this.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Corb, we were talking about that the other evening, and you were just mentioning, there's actually been some new habits established that are good by at least a few of our business owners that, and you want to highlight one or two of those?
Yeah. One of the things, obviously, cash flow. Boy, people talk about cash flow, but how many actually are tracking it month by month? Looking at when are they going to run out of cash? But it's amazing how crisis prompts action, and so many clients have really gotten in a great habit of paying attention to my receivables. When are they coming in? My payables, when are they going out? How am I staffing? Cost consciousness and infrastructure expenses. And they develop really good habits of doing that, month by month, even week by week, which every solid business should do.
Right.
It cues them up for when due diligence is done to say, oh yeah, I got my handle on cash. Here's how I do it. Here's how it works. And this is why you can believe my numbers. So, and it's been fun to see the light bulbs go on in owners that just haven't done that, where they're starting to just really own kind of the finances in a stronger, more, I think, competent way, because they've been forced to. So it's been really, it's been encouraging.
Yeah. Have you seen that too, Walter?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot more analysis going into business decisions. It's easy. Hey, should we add this person? Yeah, let's just go ahead and do it. Well, now you really need to sit down, like Corby's saying, and say, okay, we need to add this expense and see, what's the payback on doing it. So I think it's like business owners are approaching their business with a more business-like attitude, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it is really cool to see, for sure.
And there's a new awareness as well of just what is their profitable line of business, because again, it's easy to just do what you've done if it's working fine, but now that it's a little slimmer pickings, there is that sense of, all right, who's going to pay quicker? What are maybe the less glamorous jobs that are going to bring cash in sooner? And then what's my profitability on what I'm doing, and where else might I find something that could be as profitable?
So the things that you guys are referencing, have a lot to do with working more on your business than in your business, right? Because and that's one of the things, of course, we emphasize when we're talking about building sellable value, is changing the role of an owner from being central to the success of the business to being more of being in control, but being in control through delegating to others and getting everything done through and then pulling back pulling back from day to day ops so much, and then having the time and the energy to think strategically and to work more on your business than in it. And so the COVID crisis has actually served in that way, right, guys? That we have seen small business owners, indeed be forced to almost work on their business as much as in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Now, the flip side of that coin, though, is have they at the same time been forced to again work in the business maybe more than what they have been or would like to? It seems like we've observed that too, that they're not just working on it, but they're working in it a lot, maybe even more than they were prior to COVID. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that is true, but they're working in it in a different way. Where, as I reflect on our various clients, I think there's been more purpose and awareness of the team they have. You know, it's like any major stressful, dynamic that goes on in our lives, we want to lock arms with those around us that can help, because all of a sudden we realize we don't know everything. And I've seen owners just be more conscious of the skills on their team, almost more intentional of bringing subordinates alongside to provide input, to learn ways of running the business. Because again, it's when they're in it, they're realizing, it's so much. In a way, in an odd way, it's almost highlighted the need for delegation and team. And then the crisis has actually knit the teams closer together, I think. Again, there's something about being hungry together that just builds almost a culture and a community in a business that doesn't happen when things are just trucking along hunky-dory. What have you seen, Pat? I'd love your observations on that.
Well, I've seen the same things you have, and I would agree. And I think that's a great point that, yeah, they've been forced to be more aware of their teams, haven't they? Because if no other reason, I got to figure out how my team, in a lot of cases, can work remotely. And then what does that look like? And where are the risks and in regard to human resources and legal? And then do they have the skills for it? And maybe the weaknesses and strengths of team members have been more exposed, reality. So I think that's a good insight that yeah, maybe they have indeed had to press in and not just work on the business, but work in the business more than what they'd like, but not to the detriment of complete disregard of their team, but even a heightened awareness of their team and how they're going to need to develop their team going forward. And particularly in this, if indeed it is a new normal, or at least a hybrid normal where there's going to be continued business the way we've been doing it for the last year, i.e. virtual. So no, that's a good point in regard to the team. I think too, you start to think about how we're compensating our team to incent them and then retain them. We want to keep the folks on the bus that we've got on the bus that we think are going to get us to where we need to go. So no, that's a good point, Corby.
Yeah. Walter, I meant to ask. John Deeney did an article the other day highlighting EBITDA.
I saw that.
Adding the Corona to EBITDA. And one of the things that jumped out in there is he kind of commented on risk perception. That the fact that Corona has just perhaps added a new dynamic of risk assessment when it comes to value and acquisition. I'd love your insights on that.
It's interesting because I think from a valuation standpoint, you can almost get a more true value now in some senses. So, when you think about valuation, it comes down to what's the anticipated cash flow and how risky is that cash flow. So when it comes to those risk factors, and that's what determines what most people would call your multiple, it's your discount rate or your multiple. So, one company could sell for 4 times multiple, another one a 6. And usually a part of that differentiation are these what's called the specific company risk factors. And it's, a lot of times those are just kind of glossed over. It's like, okay, well, it's a small company, so we'll nick them a little bit. They don't have a management team, we'll nick them a little more, that type of thing. But I think COVID, in certain situations, really displayed the strengths and weaknesses of a company. So, a good example would be if a company has most of their revenue tied up in 1 or 2 clients, and if those clients got really hit by COVID, so that their demand for our clients' product went down, that dramatically illustrates the risk of customer concentration.
Yeah.
And the flip side be the same too. If we have a client who's a manufacturer and they're too reliant on a particular supplier that really got hit with COVID, and we saw that not even in our own businesses, but across the country, with the way these supply lines kind of got crashed. So I think it's going to really, it serves 2 purposes. One, from a valuation standpoint, I think we're going to be able to get a better handle on really what are the specific company risk factors. But I think more importantly, from the vantage point of the owner of the business, he's got a great new insight into those factors and what he can do to make his business stronger. So, again, I just think it's a good opportunity to really take a look at how the company did, what weaknesses were revealed, what strengths were revealed, and take the appropriate actions on those. The other thing about valuation is normally, you can kind of boil it down to some type of multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. But that EBITDA is, from a valuation standpoint, it's really called normalized EBITDA. So you go back through a company's earnings and you make adjustments for things. Like, let's say that they're renting their office from an LLC they own. So they may be paying too much rent or not enough rent. So you do what's called a normalizing adjustment. Or, there may be a reason why the owner of the business is taking a really large salary or a small salary. You got to normalize that stuff. Or there could be a spouse on the payroll who doesn't really do any work, all that type of stuff. So COVID is really going to be another normalization adjustment. So if you can show that you were you were consistently growing or consistently stable pre-COVID, and post-COVID, you bounce back pretty fast and you're on the good path again, then that 1 year where things got messed up by COVID is really not going to hurt you from a valuation standpoint. That's going to be normalized.
Very neat. Just a question for both you guys. We're all familiar with the lists of value drivers, and there's 7 to 10 primary ones. Do you think any of them are that almost the weighting of them has shifted, where there are certain ones that will stand out as being that is kind of moved up the food chain in criticality? Like Walter, you mentioned revenue concentration, but
that's good.
Yeah, I think cash flow and profitability.
Yeah, certainly those. But also, though, I wonder about systems and processes, and are they futuristic, if you will? Are you looking into, or have you already in upgrading where needed for the new world? And not just systems and process technologically or documented, but in regard to the people. Again, it gets back to the team and what skill sets are we going to need going forward that we haven't needed so much in the past. And differentiation. Your differentiation from competition might need to look different going forward than it did prior to COVID. And then again, the changing role of the owner, um, two sides of that coin during the virus. One of the things that, and maybe this is a good point at this point, guys, why don't we start developing like a list of 5 things that we think would be good for owners to, with the remaining minutes here, that we think would be good for them to do, uh, just in resetting for what's ahead and thinking about how they're going to exit. I would probably start with, well, something that you guys were just talking about. That's how has COVID impacted the valuation of my business, and so maybe getting a good current number on that would be good, because that impacts your all of your planning, your personal financial planning, and your timing of exit and everything else, as to the marketability and the potential value you can get from your business. What are some other things that come to your mind?
I think maintaining the financial disciplines that they've been forced to implement, financial controls, cash management, those kinds of things, they kind of percolated up to a new level of criticality this year, but those are great disciplines. Stick with them as if it were always a crisis, because we just learned that while everything may be great, the environment can change, which can radically affect your business. And if you know your numbers, you're at least prepared to respond.
And one thing I would point out for a business owner, I mean, if you came through COVID really successfully and your company is really strong, it might be a good time to look at acquiring a smaller company or a competitor, something like that. There's businesses where, like Pat mentioned earlier, it could be a strong business, but the owner has just gone through a year he never wants to go through again. And maybe he's thinking, you know what, I'd rather get out sooner than later. So there could be a business, a competitor who, for whatever reason, the business just didn't do that well in COVID, and that owner's looking to get out. So there could be some opportunities for acquisitions there.
Well, that's a great point. And then the flip side of that coin is, it may be a great time for you to actually think about selling your business, if you were thinking of selling anytime soon, if indeed you weathered the storm better than most, and you can make that part of your story.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, let me ask you something. So, because this is kind of an area you're very, very strong in, but it seems to me that pre-COVID, we always talk about key employees and, in the management team, people, people like that. And oftentimes one of the things we see is that when we meet with an owner, their idea of a key employee isn't really what we would call a key employee. It may be the person who's been there since day one, but they don't really do much. They're just almost like a comfort for the owner, that type of thing. So I would think, COVID probably revealed some employees who were stronger than owners thought and some who were weaker than owners thought. So do you think this is a good time to, as one of the action plans would be, to really reevaluate your workforce and combine that with a new incentive comp plan and really figure out who you've got on your team?
That's perfect. I mean, I was going to mention it. Yes, absolutely. I think I mentioned it a little bit ago that COVID has probably served in that way, in exposing reality about your team, where they're strong, where they're weak, and just pull back and again work on your business and think about, all right, what indeed was exposed about my team? Where are we strong? Where are we weak? Where do we need to make changes? Where do real solid folks who are on the bus and I want to keep on the bus, where do they need further development and I want to invest there? Or are there folks on the bus that going forward, where this bus is going to need to go, we're going to have to make some tough decisions and move them off. But absolutely, it's, when it don't go let a crisis go to waste. Well, that's one of the ways that you can not let this crisis go to waste, is to take advantage of the reality that was exposed about yourself and your team and everything about your business, where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are. So that would absolutely be one. And along those lines, the other thing I was going to mention was not just the team, but the owner. Just, take a look at, did I get so involved in the day-to-day, or more involved to the day-to-day, to where now I need to put a plan in place to pull myself back out again? Because we all know that the value that anyone's going to be willing to pay for your business has to be apart from you, the owner, particularly if you want to leave on your own terms and conditions. So, okay, so that's a good short list. Is there anything else that comes to your minds?
You mentioned just systems, and I think, this is another thing that COVID has revealed is, can people do what they need to do based on the systems that are in place, or is everybody scrambling around saying, wait a minute, how do we do this? How do we do that? So that would be a good point for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I had just one other thought on the mindset, and I was trying to remember who it was. Is some smart guy that mentioned, yeah, at times our tendency can be to hunker down in survival rather than be the entrepreneurs we've been and really still press into aggressively growing, and looking toward building. And when you guys mentioned just maybe great time for acquisition, even, I think there is that mindset of almost for owners to identify, given this, there's trepidation looking at the future. What are they afraid of? But also the flip side of it is, what are the opportunities? And really trying to identify those and not discounting them and setting them aside, but maybe even considering them more than they would have in the past.
Yeah, great point.
All right, so let me summarize this list. Tell me if I got it right. Accurate gap analysis. So a current valuation on your business, estimate of value. We're not talking about a full-blown qualified certified valuation, but an estimate of value on your business. And then maybe a fresh look at your retirement needs analysis and see if there's a gap there. Manage cash flow going forward, the way you've had forced to be managing it during the crisis. Assess your teams and systems, weaknesses and strengths. Kind of do a SWOT analysis on your team and your systems, and just consider what was exposed during this crisis. And in that, take a fresh look at your role and whether or not you've gotten too involved in the actual doing of the business and the day-to-day, and whether or not you need to start to plan to pull yourself back out again. Should we look to acquire businesses, a business or businesses at this point that the owners, they want to leave, but it would be good to bolt what they've built onto our business? Or should we cash out and move on if we indeed weathered the storm and actually prospered during it because of the business that we're in, the industry we're in? Could be a time to cash out, move on, if indeed that's your goal. And then Corby's last point there, not just consider future acquisitions, but what other opportunities have been presented to your particular business and industry as a result of the crisis, and how can we more exploit those opportunities? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, well, very good. So Walter, you want to wrap us up here, close us out?
Yes. So hopefully everyone has found this useful. I found it useful. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, You can reach Pat at 301-859-0860, and you can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. As always, thanks for listening. And if you've benefited from listening, please consider sharing the podcast on social media. Until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis with special guest Corby McGordon signing off.